Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
Hello and welcome to my fantasy booking warfare attempt at Chris Jericho's retirement as voted for by our Pledge Hammers and suggested by Pledge Hammer Dan. Here is, this is the new format for Wrestle Ramble. Click the eye above my head once you've watched both videos to make sure, well, so then you know which one you actually want to vote for. Ollie Davis's video has gone up at the exact same time. I will link to it at the end of this video if you've clicked this one first. So, here is my pitch. Okay, so the time period that mine takes place in, or mine begins in, is after Backlash. So we've passed the Greatest Royal Rumble, we've passed Backlash. And at the Greatest Royal Rumble, Chris Jericho made his WWE return into the Greatest Royal Rumble match, but he didn't win. And in fact, he actually wasn't in the match for a particularly long time, and he was thrown out shortly after his entrance. So we're now on the we're on the SmackDown after the Greatest Royal Rumble, but before Backlash. We're in that 1 week period between the two pay-per-views. And during a match between AJ Styles and Rusev, the Titantron comes up with Y2J's countdown clock. The countdown clock that we saw when he first made his debut into the WWE, saying that the millennium was coming. Fans pop, of course, recognizing this. However, it stops before the timer hits 0 and nothing happens. At Backlash, during AJ's WWE Championship defense, the Titantron comes on again with Y2J's countdown clock, but stops before it hits 0. Off the distraction, AJ wins. Part 1 of our story. Y2J, the true story. SmackDown Week 1. AJ comes out to cut a promo about his championship retention. And he says that while he's very proud of the victory, he has to unfortunately give a bit of an assist to his former tag team partner, Chris Jericho. He calls out Jericho to come down and kind of explain his actions, and the countdown clock begins to play again. The wah, 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 that infamous sound that we all know so well and love so dearly. But this time it does reach 0, but the thing doesn't go like it used to do. In fact, the letters Y2J change to EC3. Top 1% plays. EC3 makes his SmackDown Live debut. He comes out and AJ seems a little bit stunned by this. It's like, why are you imitating Jericho? And EC3 tells him to please shut the hell up. AJ looks incredibly bemused by all this, and EC3 tells him if he wants to know who he really is, why don't you give me a WWE Championship match later tonight on SmackDown Live? AJ accepts because he wants to know what's going on. EC3 smiles and says he knew he would. At the start of the match, EC3 comes out wearing a t-shirt that says save_us.ec3, a play on Chris Jericho's old Save Us Y2J gimmick he did in 2000 and whatever. And during this match, AJ hits EC3 with a phenomenal forearm, but the referee doesn't count the pin. He just stands there, and he just looks sad, and AJ stands up and looks a bit confused by all this, and asks the referee, like, why aren't you counting? And during all of this, EC3 has rolled to the outside, and he's grabbed the WWE Championship, and he hits AJ in the head right in front of the referee, and he locks in the walls of Jericho, and the referee calls for the bell without AJ even tapping. EC3 is the new WWE Champion. Week 2. The next week, EC3 comes out with his newly won WWE Championship, but Shane and Paige here come out because they have a few questions about the manner in which he won the WWE Championship, which, let's be honest, was pretty questionable. Shane has told Shane has asked AJ to not come to the building tonight because he is furious about what happened last week, and he doesn't want him to rip EC3's head off before they can get some sort of explanation. EC3 smiles and informs Shane that he just doesn't get it. Being in the top 1% doesn't mean that I drive fancy cars, wear nice clothes, and have a better life than everyone in this building. It means that I have friends in high places. High places that are higher than the commissioner of SmackDown Live. He tells Shane that one of his dad's golf buddies, is on the board of directors for WWE, and he agrees that Shane has been doing a pretty terrible job of running SmackDown Live. He's run off Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Look at the awful stuff that you've done. You keep getting yourselves involved in all of these things. So bad a job is Shane McMahon doing that the board of directors have unanimously agreed on a vote of no confidence, and Shane will have to step down as commissioner of SmackDown Live. But fear not, EC3 informs us, we have a suitable replacement. My aunt, Dixie Carter. Dixie Carter is the new commissioner of SmackDown Live, and that is how EC3 was able to get the ref on his side, completely paid off. He is running the show. Police escort Shane out of the ring, and Paige chases after them, asking, how the hell did this all happen? As Pages often want to do. EC3 addresses the crowd now, and he says, a lot of people have asked me why I use Chris Jericho's old Millennium gimmick. They've asked why I wore a Save Us t-shirt. The answer is quite simple. I hate Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho is a man I grew up idolizing. I bought his t-shirts, I bought his action figures, I bought pay-per-views that he was specifically on. When Jericho went from WCW to WWF, I switched the channel. I wanted to be Chris Jericho. But since then I have learned that Jericho is nothing but a fraud. And over the next few weeks, I will expose the fraud that he is, and that he's a liar. SmackDown Week 3. For fear that AJ Styles will kill him, because AJ Styles is now allowed back into the building, EC3 doesn't appear on the show, but Dixie Carter announces that due to contract stipulations that she cannot overturn, AJ will get his rematch for the WWE Championship at Money in the Bank. She also introduces the first of EC3's videos on Chris Jericho, Y2J The True Story. It's a sit-down interview sort of thing, with EC3 talking to an off-camera interview. He explains that he first came into the WWE in 2009, and the first person that met him in Florida Championship Wrestling was Chris Jericho. The man he idolized as a child growing up. Jericho took him to one side and said that he will be someone in WWE. That's the greatest bit of praise one could ever get. EC3 says that FCW run wasn't very good, and we get lots of footage of the early days of EC3 in FCW. He said, but then I got my shot on NXT Season 4, and we get clips of the then Derek Bateman, that was his name, wasn't it? Derek Bateman, on NXT in Season 4. He said, when I got to NXT, I specifically asked for Chris Jericho to be my mentor, because I knew he would be the man that would lead me to victory. After all, he led Wade Barrett to victory in Season 1. I knew he would be my guy. But I didn't get Chris Jericho. Why? Because Jericho was touring with his band Fozzy. He was too good for WWE. He was too good for NXT. He was too good for EC3. Instead, I was given Daniel Bryan, he says in a scoffing manner. Who's he ever beat? He didn't even win the first season of NXT. And because of Chris Jericho, neither did I. In the real world, outside of this WWE nonsense, Chris Jericho talks about this quite openly on his Talk is Jericho podcast that he's putting out each and every week, saying like, hey, I don't really know what's going on. I haven't been consulted on this storyline. I don't really know where it's going, what's happening. I haven't spoken to Vince in quite some time, so I'm not complaining because, hey, they're saying my name on TV and that's helping me get bookings elsewhere. So, you know, if that's where they want to go, that's the way they want to go. SmackDown Week 4, I think I'm right. Yeah, SmackDown Week 4. I haven't read this back, so I'm hoping that everything makes sense. In the next of EC3's video, he's joined by Dixie Carter, who explains that she used to run a wrestling promotion around the time that her nephew was being bullied by WWE. And while WWE was bullying him, she was being lied to by Chris Jericho. Dixie says that she contacted Jericho to come into her company, and he always returned her calls. They had several meetings, they discussed plans and even dropped contracts. And what did Jericho do? He turned up at the Royal Rumble and went crawling back to WWE. EC3 is there next to her, just shaking his head, just tapping his aunt on the shoulder, consoling her because she was lied to by this dastardly Canadian Chris Jericho. As Dixie wipes away her tears, EC3 tells we got one more video to prove that Chris Jericho isn't who he says he is, and then he will beat his former tag team partner at Money in the Bank. Final part of Y2J The True Story airs. EC3 addresses the camera directly this time. He says that Chris Jericho is a fraud. He says every time Chris Jericho leaves WWE, he fails. He talks about Chris Jericho's failed acting career. He says that Fozzy wouldn't have sold any albums if it wasn't for his previous fame from the WWE. He says that Jericho was run out of this company, and what did he do? He ran to Japan. And what did he do when he got there? He failed. We actually get pictures of Jericho losing to Kenny Omega. Obviously, none of this is actually specifically said, but it's all implied. He came back for the Greatest Royal Rumble, and he failed. Oh, we started podcast. Always got a band. Always running a wrestling show on a cruise. You know who go on cruises? People who can't afford a yacht. I own a yacht. You don't see me putting a wrestling ring on it. You say you're all in? Well, I'm all in on this company. I'm the WWE Champion, and AJ Styles, you are going to learn this at Money in the Bank. At Money in the Bank, through screwy means, EC3 retains the WWE Championship, and Dixie Carter announces that he cannot challenge for the title while EC3 is still champ. So over the next couple of weeks, we're in part 2 of this story now. Over the next couple of weeks, EC3 comes out to prove to the SmackDown Live audience that that Y2J is a fraud, and all the things that he did aren't as impressive as we were all once led to believe. Later in the show, he comes out for a scheduled match with Ralphus as his private security for the match, Jericho's old WCW enforcer. The following week, he calls himself the Man of 1,005 holds, and he lists them all off. And as this is being read out, Dixie Carter comes out from the back, pushing Dean Malenko out onto the stage and orders him to get into the ring because this is his job and you will do what my nephew wants. EC3 locks Malenko in the walls of Jericho and Malenko taps out. Chris Jericho beat Dean Malenko. It's not that difficult. EC3 just proved that. The following week, he teams up with a very reluctant Lance Storm to take on 2 local competitors, which of course they win. Jericho wasn't really the star of this tag team. Anyone can team with Lance Storm. The following week, he says he got into a backstage fight with one of the toughest people on the planet, a man who wants to know who's next. Of course, referencing the infamous backstage fight between Jericho and Goldberg, but of course it's Gillberg that comes out playing off this famous story, and EC3 beats him down. Each time he does one of these skits, he looks to the back, hoping that Jericho will come out and challenge him. And each time he doesn't, and EC3 tells the audience that this is why Jericho is a fraud. All throughout this, EC3 plays videos of his new band Fizzy, and clips from a podcast that he has actually released called Talk is Carter, where he interviews other people that don't like Jericho, and Jericho's obviously still pushing this idea on his podcast Talk is Jericho, that he doesn't know where this storyline is going, but he's really happy that Lance Storm got some TV time. The following week, he holds his own version of the Festival of Friendship with Kevin Owens. Owens, of course, is none too pleased about this, and he just calls the whole thing stupid. He tries to rationalize with EC3, like, what are you doing? This is completely ridiculous. But every time he tries to leave, Dixie Carter is there to threaten him with his job, reminding him that he has a family at home and he needs to play ball in this little situation. Owens reluctantly rolls back into the ring and reads his lines that has been given to him as a script in as monotone a manner as possible, because it's the exact same presentation as the original Festival of Friendship. Owens is ready, though, because he knows that he gets to attack EC3 at the end of this, because that's how the Festival of Friendship ends. And so he hands he hands EC3 the list, which has the list of KO. But before he lifts it out, he hits Kevin Owens with the mic, because he says that a real hero would have seen Owens' turn coming, and EC3 is a real hero and not a fraud. At Extreme Rules, EC3 vacates, big air quotes for podcast listeners, the WWE Championship, as he will accomplish the same amazing feat that Jericho did at Vengeance 2001. He comes out for his match, he's there and he's ready. The Rock's music hits. The crowd pops because it's Rocky's theme. But it's not The Rock who comes out, it's some jabroni with rubbish trunks and peel-on tattoos, carrying a foam version of the WCW Championship. EC3 easily beats him with the walls of Jericho with the help of Dixie Carter. Steve Austin's music hits next, but it's just some other jabroni that comes out looking a bit like Steve Austin. But this guy actually gets some offense in and gets a roll-up, and there's a bit of a 1-2. Whoa! EC3 nearly lost there. But through interference from Dixie Carter, EC3 beats both The Rock and Steve Austin on the same night. He challenges Jericho to show up on SmackDown this coming Tuesday. EC3 comes out with Dixie Carter for the main event segment wearing his Save Us EC3 t-shirt and a light-up jacket with a scarf carrying the list of Carter. He says this is all Jericho has left, a bunch of stupid gimmicks that make up for the fact he could never win the big one as someone the fans adore, which is true. Jericho has always said the one thing he always wants to accomplish in his career was win the WWE Championship as a babyface. He's only ever won main championships as a heel. So there's EC3 playing into real life scenarios here. Suddenly the countdown clock comes on, the countdown clock that we saw way back when EC3 was mocking him, but it stops before it hits 0, and Carter just starts ranting again. The Save Us Y2J gimmick starts. It stops, and Carter rants again. The countdown clock begins, and this time it reaches 0, the lights go out, the old Jericho music hits, and a shadowy figure is on the stage doing the Y2J pose. When the lights come up though, it's AJ Styles, and it turns out that Chris Jericho is behind EC3. It was all a ruse. He was helping AJ, and Jericho runs wild in EC3, hitting several code breakers and locking in the walls of Jericho as security runs down to break up all this madness. This builds to a SummerSlam match where Jericho challenges for the WWE Championship against EC3, and it's a real scrap with zero interference from Dixie. And it looks like Jericho has the match won after the code breaker, but Dixie pulls the referee out at the last second. EC3 hits the 1%er and gets the win. The following SmackDown Live, how am I doing for time? I'm nearly there. Jericho says that he took EC3 to his limit, something no one has ever done before. He challenges EC3 to a rematch at the next pay-per-view. EC3 comes out and says, "Why should I accept your match? I've proved my point. Jericho is a fraud. He's a phony. He's a liar. He can't get the job done." Jericho says that EC3 only won because of his powerful aunt who runs this joint, and he needs to shut the hell up. EC3 says if that's the way he wants it, then that's the way he's going to get it. He can have his rematch, but I want your career on the line. Jericho accepts, but he says that just a reminder, the next pay-per-view is Hell in a Cell, so it's only fitting that the match be in that structure. Now after a grueling match, it's Hell in a Cell title versus career. After a grueling match with lots of weapons, violence and submissions, Jericho locks in the walls of Jericho and it looks like EC3 is going to tap, but he powers out of the move and hits the 1%er for the win. Jericho has lost his career and EC3 is now the biggest heel in WWE.
So that was Luke's pitch. Click the eye above our head where you can vote for myself or Luke. My video has gone live right now at the exact same time as well, so if you haven't watched mine already, go over and watch that and then vote. It doesn't matter which poll you vote in, which videos poll you vote in, we're going to total them all up. Or if you haven't seen mine, click this video right here, which will take you right to my pitch for Chris Jericho's retirement of fantasy booking warfare. I think it's better.